what if everything went right in this situation? And just writing out that whole flow. It's not about thinking that all of this is going to pan out, but we often default to the opposite question, right? Well, what's going to go wrong in this situation? And then our mind just starts to loop like, we don't have enough money. I don't have enough resources for this or enough time to set up whatever it is, right? Versus just going in with an imagine if kind of possibility, like mindset thinking. Then we just unlock our minds without any limitations. And then usually at the end of a process like that, there's a lot on the page or a lot we've thought about. And one of those avenues is where we can take the next first step, for example. Hi, everyone. Marc Champagne here, author of Personal Socrates, Better Questions, Better Life. On Everforward Radio today with all of you, we are jamming about mental fitness and how to train our minds to work for us instead of against us.
3, 2, 1.
Marc, welcome, man. I got a big floating 55-inch head here in the studio for the show today. It's good to see you, man.
That's a lot of gray hair in your frame. It's great to see you.
It's more like Silver Fox, I thought.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take it.
Welcome, man. Welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. And I've been looking forward to this one. I know there's definitely a lot of topics that you and I overlap and are passionate about. So I have no doubt we're going to have a great jam.
No doubt is right, man. Well, your work, I love because it does one of the best things for me. And I think for us as humans, and that's poses questions to get us to think about more questions. Questions are the most powerful thing in the world, I think. My favorite ones are the ones that don't yield answers, but just more questions. So, I mean, please, you literally wrote the book on it. What is the power behind questions and why do we need to be more cognizant of them right now?
Yeah. I mean, for me, this is just my personal story with prompts or questions. It's just that, a good question or a quality question gives us the luxury of a pause, and, asked at the right time can literally change our life. Or if you want to think about it from a more micro moment, in the moment, if we're, fearful or upset or anxious, I mean, if you layer in a gratitude type prompt, I mean, you immediately can pause that looping narrative and flip into, a more motivating state of mind almost instantly. And for me, the questions are what do that. And, the other thing is that we're all asking questions all the time. It's just, are we asking the right ones? Are they of quality? Are they well-timed? And do they make sense with where we're at currently in our life?
How do you know you're asking yourself the right question?
It surfaces. I think that's the big thing, right? You start to see, for me, and that's where the mental fitness comes in as a framework to help with these prompts. But the more, whether it's journaling, breath work, meditation, taking a long walk to try to still your mind. I mean, whatever the practice is, all of these things just help slow us down and boost our self-awareness. And when that's boosted, then you start seeing the questions and you start, prompts like, what am I pretending not to know? Or where am I playing it safe? All of a sudden that stuff starts to come up naturally. And it just happens. I mean, it happened for me, and that's why on the back of, for my book, I put, we're always one question away from a completely different life, because that one question surfaced for me in probably the darkest time that I had to go through with the shutting down of a business.
Can you kind of shine a light on that dark time for us? Because sure. I love hearing about ways we can move forward in life. That's the whole concept of the show. But, typically we need to move forward because we're stuck, or we think we're stuck, and we're in a position that we don't know how we're going to get out of. So can you take us there?
Yeah. I mean, so the backstory is that I spent about a decade in the corporate world in the healthcare space, in various roles, sales, analytics. And at the very end, I got to the place that I really was striving to land, and that was in product management. But throughout that time in that corporate world, I was always getting up a little bit earlier in the morning to just prime my mind with positive mental nutrition is what I like to call it. And that showed up usually as, especially back in that time, reading Success Magazine or reading blog posts or following, the work of Tony Robbins and Robin Sharma and just people that I knew had this different outlook on life or had the tools to really train their minds. And it didn't take very long, to be completely honest with you, to see that 100% of them were asking powerful questions. And so what I would do is I would take those questions, I'd write them down, and then I'd bring them up the next morning, and I would journal on those prompts in relation to where I was at, either personally or professionally, and just did that for years. And eventually really flipped that whole practice into a digital practice. I was traveling a lot with that job and grew really frustrated with the lack of apps or digital tools to support that flow, right? Take a question, I would copy it, then I'd paste it into another app. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this, because at the same time, the meditation apps were all starting to reach mainstream popularity, like Headspace and Calm and whatnot. And now there's, a million other ones, but there was nothing to guide people into a journaling practice. So and this is the lead up to obviously some of those darker periods, but I left that corporate world, co-founded the company Kyo, which was the Japanese word for today, because we're doing everything possible to help people just be present and land in the present moment, or the day, for example. And we reached 86.9 million people with that app in under 2 years, which was insane. Which was
well
insane.
Done, man. That's
Thank
amazing.
you. But, and here's the but, at the same time, or I should say in the same year, as I'm looking at that Apple dashboard, I'm also, the next step basically is to hit delete from App Store because the business model wasn't working. We needed more time, we needed more money and more mental capacity, and we essentially ran out of, all of those things. And I also started to feel like I was a hypocrite, talking about mental fitness and all these practices to help, keep your mind in a healthy state. And I was feeling, couldn't feel farther from that state of mind. I was stressed and financially worried. At that time, I had my first son would have been 2, and I was just coming home always worried that stress was being layered on top of him at an early age without even him realizing it. So that moment is where things really started to feel hopeless, because I always had said when I left that corporate role, the question I asked myself was, well, what's the worst that can happen? If everything fails, I'll just come back to this industry. I mean, I'm leaving on good terms, but along that road or that journey, I came to this realization that industry just didn't feel aligned anymore, and that I finally found exactly what I needed to be doing. But I just shut down the business and deleted the vehicle, right? And that left me just, I would say honestly, the first time in my life without any kind of plan, and just feeling like how am I going to afford to live and support, my family? Like what's next? There's just no optimism on the horizon. And I just remember those days waking up, like really almost like looking in the mirror and the surreal experience of not even recognizing, the reflection back. And had never felt that in my life. And thankfully,
because of where you were in life.
Yeah.
You're like, I can't believe this is the version of me that I'm looking at.
Yeah. And almost with this chase with like this numbed out feeling, because there was just so much fear and anxiety there that, I was just kind of getting up and trying to do everything possible to take some sort of step forward, but just not really feeling. And the only thing that I can thankfully say is that because of the work on the app, and that's also where my podcast Behind the Human started, I had hundreds of interviews and prompts and practices from all types of top performers and thinkers, and knew enough that if I could just layer on some gratitude practices and bring me to the present moment, even for seconds, to stop that negative loop, that I could get to a prompt that can change things. And finally got to that stage after a lot of walks out of that co-working space. I got to the prompt, what do I want for my life? And then that led to the next one. Well, if that's what I want, well, what's one step closer to that reality? Who do I need to speak to? What do I need to do next? And that just slowly started to regain and rebuild the hope. And that's when I came to that realization that, wow, if that could stop me and prevent me from going into essentially what I felt like was a deep depression. I mean, imagine if we can just have those prompts coming up and train ourselves to ask them more frequently so we don't have to hit those walls, but just to bring more self-awareness, more presence, and be able to really design the life that we want.
That question, what do I want for my life? I've asked it, and I'll probably ask it again. But I want to know, unique to your story and the timeline of when you asked that, you're coming off of this great endeavor. You're coming off of this app success, that you're coming off of success. And then that ends. And so my question is, what was it like asking yourself that question after probably doing the thing that you thought was going to be the thing? It's a powerful question. I think people ask on the front side of a new venture or adventure that is like a catalyst for what you wind up doing. But you were on the other side of it. So I'm wondering, did it sting more? Was it more powerful? Did it make you appreciate the lesson in closing down this previous business? What was the weight of it?
Yeah. Well, the weight, I mean, the weight was more on the positive side because I already was feeling the trauma of deleting that app, because essentially it wasn't just deleting an app in a business. It was deleting my identity for those 3 years. And what flooded in my mind was, I'll never forget the look and the comments from my ex-colleagues when I was leaving. It was almost as if they were saying, wow, you're so courageous for leaving this well-paying job to go do this. Like, I have an idea too, but I just can't do it. And so that kept coming into my mind. Be like, wow, like how, look at me now, right? Like, I tried the idea. And mind you, like in retrospect, I would say that business succeeded in probably about 80% of the whole thing. 20% didn't because of the financials. But it's the only reason I'm speaking with you. It's the only reason I wrote a book. It's the only reason my show's ranking around the world when it comes to mental fitness. I mean, these weren't objectives, but that came out of that journey. And probably the biggest gift of them all was, landing on that question and realizing that this is the work that I want to be doing. So that question, it provided the hope, and that's what I needed, because everything else was just terrifying. And it was enough. And let's be real with the scenario. I mean, I answered the question, but then all that stuff continues to come back. But again, this is where the mental fitness comes in. And thankfully, because of at least training for a decade in that field, I had enough practices to constantly reshift and reset my mind to go back to the answer of that question. But without that answer, there's no clarity, right? And then now you're kind of just running around, just chasing things and making decisions that are based on fear that usually aren't the most aligned. So it was kind of a mix of knowing that I wanted to do that, trusting that I'm on the right journey, and also trusting that I have a whole toolkit to help, keep my mind in a positive state.
What do you mean by that term, mental fitness? How do you define it? How do you live it? How do you apply it?
Yeah, for me, mental fitness is, and it came out of necessity actually with the journaling app, because I found people were having a hard time moving past their preconceived kind of definition of what journaling was. And the thing that would always come up was, oh, you're speaking about like the 12-year-old girl that writes in her diary about the boy at school type thing. And I'd always say, not that there's anything wrong with that, but not necessarily. I'm talking about, I've been doing this for probably a decade, and the people that you're watching their TED Talks or you're reading their biographies are all doing this, because the practice behind journaling is just reflection. And that's what I'm talking about. So
it's just a vehicle. Yeah, it's just a vehicle.
Exactly. And then the other element that at least brought me to mental fitness was, most people can understand or appreciate or resonate with physical fitness. And when you take that lens and think of mental fitness as the umbrella of anything that you're doing to train your mind. That can be also mental health. That can be also mental resiliency, performance, agility, like everything that falls under that umbrella. But it feels more motivating. You know, everything else is usually pushed over to mental health, which I mean, very important topic, but it's usually discussed from the point of you're pulling yourself out of a hole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically,
Sure, yeah.
what I kind of
Many
describe
times
is
it
that,
is, yeah.
yeah, out of that, that situation when I asked, what do I want for my life? Like, that's where I was at. But mental fitness, like, no, I mean, I can do something here. I can try this one thing out. And if that thing doesn't resonate with me, just like if you're not a fan of running, that doesn't rule out exercise, right? So try, you can try journaling, meditation, breath work. I mean, so many different things. And it's just a language or terminology that I find most people resonate a little bit more with and are curious. Oh, like, what is this? Let's try it out.
How do you institute, or how do you recommend instituting a mental fitness practice? What does that look like? How do we prioritize it? How do we make it so that it's like our other aspects of fitness and wellness, and we're already taking care of ourselves?
Yeah, great question. I mean, for me, I know I'm biased, obviously, but for me, everything starts and stops with the mind. So even your physical fitness routine, I mean, it's your mind that's telling you to go to the gym or perform whatever exercise that works for you, or to make healthy decisions. So I always try to do, if things have to drop for whatever reason, the mental fitness is never dropping, because that's the thing, that's the control center of everything else, right? So with that being said, I mean, kind of like anything, or at least what I've noticed from my work, I mean, I can rhyme off my routine, and that's evolved and changed and whatnot over the last decade plus, but that may not work for you. So the key is to figure out two things. One, what are the practices or situations or activities that put a smile on your face? Like, identify maybe 5 things there that without a shadow of a doubt will flip you into a positive state of mind, and incorporate that somehow into your routine. And then the other thing is really just to be open and experiment, right? Like, try different things. I mean, I've tried so many different things now because of a lot of just podcasts and books, that all of a sudden, wow, this is really, breath work was one of them. I had no training around breath work, and now it's probably the staple of my routine. And sorry, probably the third thing is really just prioritizing the time in your routine and setting yourself up for success. Like, so we're just in a culture that, like, we really want to go all in and just, like, I'm going to do an hour tomorrow of mental fitness, right? Which is totally fine. But the odds of you being consistent with that then start to fall off dramatically, because that's too big of a gap if you're not doing really anything. So take a look at your current routine and see where you can stack on practices to things that you're already doing. Easiest thing would be the coffee's brewing, your tea's steeping, or your first glass of water. I mean, just check in with yourself. How do I feel today? One word answer. And if you feel stress, well, where do you feel that? Where do I feel that in my body? And just that alone, now all of a sudden you're identifying, okay, well, there's something that's off. Why? Why is that? What's fueling that stress? And you have the opportunity to then diagnose, okay, well, here, I can make some changes. Because, I mean, the reality of the situation, whether you're asking that question or checking in with yourself or not, you're still rolling into the day with those emotions. And that's clouding your thinking. That's taking up mental real estate, and it affects everything we do, right? But it's just one simple question that, while the coffee's brewing, you can do a quick check-in, and the follow-up can always be, how do I want to show up today? One word. And you set an intention, and your mind looks for that path throughout the day. Just that alone. I mean, I guarantee if you're doing that for a week straight, you'll start noticing differences.
I think just that shift alone of how am I showing up versus how do I want to show up is one of the most powerful perspective shifts we can have, because just in that little change, it's reminding us of the power and dominion we actually do have over our state of being, our day, our mental fitness, our capacity to do what we want, how we want, to a certain degree, I think. But it's just, it's a little reminder, and we need these reminders of our power and how much of the life we have versus the life we want is just in that nuance.
It's right so there. True. Because the thing with the reminders is that if we don't have the reminders, unfortunately, we're just pushed onto a default path of society, which is typically negative. It's typically, not uplifting news. So we're always shifting by default into this kind of fear state, right? So whatever we need those little subtle reminders to bring us back to, oh yeah, this is what I want. This is the mountain, that I want to climb. And if it's not, you have the opportunity. You don't have to start at the bottom of the base every time. You can swing over to the next mountain. Everything you've already done has helped. But there's nothing worse than getting to the top and realizing, shit, like that's the wrong mountain. When literally just a few minutes a day can save years worth of effort that is going to the wrong place, just with some clear questions to understand. Okay, well, like, who am I now? And I'm borrowing some of these prompts from one of the chapters in the book, James Clear. Who am I now, and who am I optimizing to become? Just getting clear there.
And how do we optimize who we're becoming? Through our habits, which is definitely what he drives home in that book.
Exactly. Right? Just understanding, okay, well, are my habits or the things I'm doing day in, day out, they're either supporting that person or they're pushing us farther away from that person. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And it's not about, judging ourselves, like be kind to yourself, but at least you have the data or the information and can make some subtle shifts, right? Okay, like this week I'm going to work here. And as you know, James, talks a lot about just the 1% better, right? And that compounds over time. And next thing you know, you're closer to that person.
When you were kind of shifting your perspective and making time for this and asking these different questions, I'm sure yielding a little bit more awareness to the habits that were serving you or not serving the version of you that you wanted to be. What was most surprising for you in your habit shifts? Was it more of, I need to make new habits, I need to make better habits, I need to change ones I already have, I need to get rid of some that I already have? What was that kind of habitual great awakening, if you will?
It was really more trusting that the kind of the foundational habits that I had set up, knowing that these were the things that would keep my mind or bring my mind back to a positive state day in and day out, were the right ones, and that I just had to stick it out long enough to trust that things will start to develop. The right people will start to show up because I'm putting in the effort, right? It's just like anyone that's in sales. I mean, you've experienced this before. Like you reach out to all these people and you get ghosted, or you have zero replies back, and then you start to question, well, is the approach working?
The common denominator here is me, right? So you begin
exactly. But at the same time, some of these things just do take time. And what I noticed was all of a sudden, like something that I had formed this wild, like New York Times best-selling author story in my mind about why I didn't hear back from LinkedIn or Lego or something about some mental fitness work, was completely nothing to do with me. And then 3 months later, it said, oh, sorry, the email slipped, or, we had some changes in the department, like, let's chat. And all of a sudden you're back in that, like, excited frame of mind. But for 3 months, like, that's kind of, not that it was all consuming, because there was more than that going on, but it's all of those small little pieces of like emotional baggage or thoughts that they continue to clog up, the mind, right? Just like a physical space, you keep jamming boxes in a room, and, you're trying to seek out and see what the path is. Eventually you have to clean out the room, right? Or let some air in. And we often, and I'm guilty of this as well, but I can, thankfully, because of the tools, can catch myself when that's starting to happen, do a little spring cleaning in the mind so that we're feeling good and also can see the next step forward.
Something you said a few moments ago about kind of waiting for the opportunity to come. These certain things take time. It's compounding success. Reminds me of this concept I pulled from the book, The One Thing, And it's that I actually flip it on reverse. They say that sometimes you're failing so slowly, it feels like success because you're not fully detached enough to really pay attention to the minutia. But I actually like the opposite. To your point of time and opportunity, it's sometimes we're actually succeeding so slowly that it feels like failure. And then one day you wake up and you're like, holy shit, it all makes sense. Or this person finally hit you back up, or you just get the big picture, or something happens. What is, luck is when time meets opportunity. It's there. And so I love to kind of look at it that opposite way, is, we're oftentimes succeeding so slowly, we feel like failing.
Yeah. Well, and we're trying, we're experimenting. And a lot of that period, right after the app was experimentation and being okay that it's, the majority of what I'm trying out probably won't work, but I'm just, as long as I'm putting in the effort, results in some capacity will show up. And I think like that time situation for me, the way that showed up was with the book. I mean, there was never a goal to write a book. I was talking to the now publisher, Joey from Baron Fig, who ironically they're the company behind actually James Clear's habit tracking journal.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, but I only know of them because when I was running the app, I was looking for a print partner. One of the features was going to be to allow for a beautiful export of people's journals into a nice physical, like high quality notebook. And I connected with them, and I mean, long story short, at that time they didn't have that kind of capacity or that ability to customize things one off, but we stayed in touch. And again, I was just reigniting the network and talking to as many people that I knew were motivating and that knew other people and so forth, because I was clear on the path that I was going down. And I was explaining this idea of what the book is essentially now. And Joey said, you know what, we've always wanted to publish a book. We've done so many guided journals, and it would be amazing to work on this with you. And I just, like, you can't predict that stuff, right? And that,
you can't plan for that. That's for damn sure.
And that was basically a 3-year relationship of just, staying in touch and vibing well together. And next thing you know, we're talking about, timelines and how this could pan out, for example. So I think it's, and that's just the trust that, again, it's not about just waiting for stuff to show up without action. It's not The Secret. For some people get confused with manifestation and all these different things, and I'm all for that stuff. I talk about it in the book, but what people often miss is that there's action behind, setting those intentions and visualizing where you want to be. And then that's where, all of a sudden these things just start to happen, and it feels like they're out of the blue, but they're not at all out of the blue. You put the effort in.
You also have, you're sharing with me a creativity practice, a creative habit that kind of has helped you in some profound ways. So I love the creative angle. I love getting creative, staying creative. It oftentimes doesn't scream the obvious when we're talking about this kind of stuff of asking intentional questions, being more mindful. That kind of seems more logic driven, just kind of rudimentary stuff of I need to do A, B, and C to get D. Creativity in the purpose driven life and the productive life is when you account for the unaccountable, when you make time for the things that you can't predict. You need to just be in surrender to, I think. What is your creative habit, and how does it serve you in the ways that we've been talking about?
I mean, there's two big things. One, probably the foundational principle, is to do everything possible to allow for space in my days or schedule. And that means, and I'm human like the rest of us. Like, there are days that are back to back, and we all know how that feels when you get to the end of the day. It feels like all you've done is, in our case, record podcasts and go from one to the next, right? Yeah. And we haven't processed anything in our minds. And then essentially we flip out of the work mode and go to our doing.
We're not being, really.
Exactly. And hopefully there's a reset the next day or so, but often, sometimes that just continues to repeat and just compounds and compounds. And it's in those moments that we're basically stifling any type of potential creativity or new ideas to come up, or you know what, that's who I should talk to about
Mm.
project X or whatever it is. So I do everything possible to, especially for my mornings, to have a block until at least 11 a.m. And that is just for me to be working, writing, working on the podcast, if there's other different writing assignments, like any type of creative work, because I'm not bogged down by other conversations, or I'm not fueling my mind with more content, let's just
Mm.
say, right? So that's one of the things. The other thing that I love, and this is linked to journaling and questions, is to reflect on questions like, what if everything went right in this situation? And just writing out that whole flow. It's not about thinking that all of this is going to pan out, but we often default to the opposite question, right? Well, what's going to go wrong in this situation? And then our mind just starts to loop, like, we don't have enough money, I don't have enough resources for this, or enough time to set up whatever it is, right? Versus just going in with an imagine if kind of possibility, like mindset thinking. Then we just unlock our minds without any limitations. And then usually at the end of a process like that, there's a lot on the page, or a lot we've thought about. And one of those avenues is where we can take the next first step, for example. And that's just a quick way to really get into a different way of thinking.
Now that you're at this new level, now that the listener is at this new level, we become aware of these things and we're maintaining certain things. How do we not stay stuck in maintenance? How do we, because I've been there. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think it's easy, or it becomes easier for us to get more comfortable at this new level, this new version of ourselves, because it's better than before. And we've got all these new habits and things in place to make sure that this new level of feeling good, being good, doing good is there. That mental fitness is there. How do we not stay stagnant in this next level? You know, how can we make sure that's still serving us, but then, you know, going to the next level and the next level?
Yeah. I mean, you keep asking questions, you know, as long as we can keep our curiosity alive, we'll always err on the side of progress. Right. And you know, with just whether it's a fault or not, I mean, we're always striving for more. I mean, as long as I think your vision is aligned with something that's healthy, there's nothing wrong with, okay, I reached the top of this mountain. Well, what's the next one? Right. And because I think it's Tony Robbins that says this, I mean, just true happiness is linked to progress. If you really think about it, when we feel like we're making progress, even the smallest little win in the day, that puts a smile on our face, right? So
Move the
I think,
needle. Yeah.
exactly,
One little tick. Absolutely.
one little tick, and then and back to James Clear, that just compounds, right? So for me, the way that shows up is just, you know, asking questions like, well, what am I pretending not to know here? And that unearths, like, usually the location to hone in on and go a little bit further, right? But the key is to allow and create some space for that time to think. You know, it's that's where we'll see the next step. So just keep asking questions and keep trusting, you know, your intuition. We know where we know the answers to what am I pretending not to know. It's glaringly obvious if you just slow down and start thinking about that, and you're like, whether that's your health, your nutrition, your business, your personal relationships, they're all there. It's just taking the time to be courageous enough to answer the question, right? And then now you have insight and you have the data, and it's up to us to take the step.
Well, taking the step is what we're all about here at Everforward. And I want to acknowledge your work, Marc. Thank you so much for sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly with us, and reminding us the power of questions, the necessity of asking questions. And what I love most, honestly, is that the concept of making and keeping space for the unaccountable, for the creative, for the questioning. It's all a part of the process. It's all a part of progress. So my final question for you, my man, is those two words. How do they land on you here today? When you hear ever forward, what does that mean to you? How do you live a life ever forward?
Oh, for me, that just means showing up joyful more days than not,
Mm.
and yeah, just progress on all things in life, and just doing everything possible to be present, be present with you, not thinking about the next thing or whatever, but just being here. Because if you can really suck up the present moment and be there, like, there's nothing better than that, right? I'm not in the past, I'm not in the future, I'm here with you. I'm appreciating the beautiful backdrop to your video recording and all the amazing questions that you asked. I mean, life doesn't get better than that. It's amazing.
It's funny. I was laughing not at your answer, but the concept I think is actually a pretty pertinent one. Sometimes just being present is one of the things that we need to just suck up and do. We talk so much about the things we need to just suck up and do because it's supposed to move us forward, that it's the obvious work necessary to get the progress we're talking about. But man, sometimes it's hard because of all the things in our head, all the things we're working on, technology, social media, people, noise, like just we could learn to suck it up and be more present.
Yeah, I like that.
I love that, man. Yeah, made me laugh. So Marc, thank you so much, my man. We're going to have all of your information in the book listed down in the show notes for everybody, but where can they go right now to connect with you and learn more?
Yeah, behindthehuman.com is the easiest place. That's my personal website, and everything that I'm up to is over there. And I mean, please, send a message. I'd love to know the questions that really resonate most with you in your life and that have helped you in big pivots. As you can probably tell, I'm a bit of a collector of these prompts. So share away.
Amazing, man. Well, thank you.
Thank you.